I used to believe that love conquered all, that trust was unbreakable when built on years of shared dreams and promises. That was before I found the statement that shattered my world into a million gleaming pieces. My name is Lucille, and until last Tuesday I thought I had it all figured out. A corner office at Morrison and Blake Financial Services, a marriage that made my colleagues envious, and the kind of life my grandmother had always dreamed for me. The inheritance she left me was supposed to be our nest egg, our future. Another late night? Nigel's voice carried from the kitchen as I walked through our front door. The familiar smell of his signature pasta filled the house. The Harrison portfolio needed reviewing, I called back, dropping my briefcase by the stairs. Something felt off about their numbers. He appeared in the doorway, dish towel over his shoulder, that boyish smile that had made me fall for him 8 years ago still intact. Always the perfectionist. Come here. I let him pull me into a hug, breathing in the scent of garlic and his cologne. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have pushed him away. Mail came for you, he said, gesturing to the pile on the counter. Looks important. I flipped through the envelopes until I reached one from our bank. Usually Nigel handled the joint accounts, but this one was addressed to me specifically. I tore it open, expecting nothing more than a routine statement. The first transaction that caught my eye made my blood run cold. Nigel, I said, keeping my voice steady, why is there a transfer of $50,000 to your mother's account? He froze mid-stir, his back to me. Oh, that. Mum needed some help with her medical bills. Medical bills? I flipped to the next page. And I suppose Bruce needed medical attention too. Another $40,000 to his account? The wooden spoon clattered against the pot. Luce, I can explain. Explain what? My finger traced down the list of transactions. That you've been systematically draining my grandmother's inheritance to fund your family's lifestyle? The Maldives vacation your mother wouldn't stop bragging about at Christmas. Was that her medical treatment? He turned to face me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. Their family, Lucille, they needed help. They needed help? I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. That money was meant for our future, Nigel, for the children we talked about having. How much is left? His silence was answer enough. How long? I demanded, gripping the counter to steady myself. How long have you been lying to me? 2 years, he whispered. Mom was in trouble with her mortgage, and then Bruce's business was failing, and it just snowballed. I thought about all the times I'd sat across from clients, advising them on protecting their assets, while my own husband had been stealing from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Does your mother know where the money came from? He nodded slowly. They all do. They thought you'd understand, that since we're family now. Family? I cut him off. Family doesn't steal from each other, Nigel. Family doesn't conspire behind your back to take what isn't theirs. My phone buzzed. A text from Sandra. Drinks tonight. You seem off lately. If she only knew. We can fix this, Nigel pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. I'll talk to Mom, make arrangements to pay it back. With what money? I asked quietly. Your mother's vacation fund? Bruce's new Mercedes? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, a car alarm went off, its shrill wail matching the screaming in my head. I trusted you, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I trusted all of you. Lucille, please. I need some air. I grabbed my keys from the counter, the statement still clutched in my other hand. Don't follow me. As I drove through the darkening streets, my grandmother's voice echoed in my head. Never let anyone make you feel small, Lucille. Not even the ones you love. I pulled into the parking lot of our favourite bar, where Sandra would be waiting. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Nigel, but something else caught my eye. An email notification about our holiday home's property taxes. The holiday home we'd bought last year, the one Nigel's family didn't know about yet. A plan began to form in my mind, sharp and clear as crystal. If they wanted to take what was mine, maybe it was time to give them exactly what they deserved. I smiled for the first time since opening that statement. Nigel's family had no idea what was coming. "You're going to do what?" Sandra nearly choked on her martini, her eyes wide with disbelief. I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the warmth of revenge wash over me. "I'm going to sell the holiday home, the one Nigel thinks is our secret nest egg." "And then what? Show them the sold sign and say, 'Surprise.'" Sandra leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Lucille, this isn't you. The old me died when I saw that bank statement." I pulled out my phone, showing her the real estate agent's message. "The market's hot right now. I can get well above what we paid for it." "Have you even confronted his mother about this?" The memory of Alia's smug face at Christmas flashed through my mind. "Oh, you mean when she was showing off her Maldives photos? The ones my grandmother's money paid for?" Sandra winced. "Okay, point taken, but—" My phone buzzed. Another message from Nigel. I ignored it. "Remember what my grandmother used to say?" I asked, tracing the rim of my wine glass. "Sometimes the best revenge is letting people crash into the consequences of their own actions." "I don't think she meant it quite like this," Sandra muttered. The next morning, I met with Rachel, my real estate agent, at her office. The morning sun cast long shadows across her desk as she spread out the paperwork. "You're sure about this?" she asked, highlighting the signature lines. "It's a beautiful property." "I'm sure." I signed my name with steady hands. "How long until we can list it?" "We can have it up by this afternoon. The market's incredibly active right now." Perfect. Phase 1 of my plan was in motion. When I got home that evening, Nigel was waiting. He'd been sleeping in the guest room since our confrontation, but tonight he was in the kitchen, cooking again. A peace offering. "I talked to Mom," he said as I walked in. "She's willing to work something out." "Is she?" I kept my voice neutral, setting my briefcase down. "And what exactly did she suggest?" He stirred the pot nervously. She offered to let us use their timeshare in Florida. "As compensation." I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. "Their timeshare, the one they bought with my money?" "Lucille, please. They're trying." "Not hard enough." I pulled out my laptop, making a show of checking my email. "But speaking of properties, I was thinking we should invite your family to the holiday home. You know, the one we bought last year." His spoon clattered against the pot. "What? Why not? It might be nice, all of us together. One big, happy family." The words tasted like vinegar in my mouth. "But we agreed to keep that place private, our special getaway." I smiled, thinking of the sold sign that would soon be standing in the front yard. "Times change, Nigel. People change. Besides, your mother's always talking about how family should share everything." He studied my face, uncertainty clouding his features. "You're serious about this?" "Absolutely." I opened my phone and started typing. "In fact, I'm sending them all invitations right now. Next weekend would be perfect." "Lucille." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't you trust me?" I echoed his words from countless conversations, watching them hit their mark. Later that night, I sat on our back porch, my grandmother's old shawl wrapped around my shoulders. The stars were bright, reminding me of nights spent on her porch listening to her stories of resilience and dignity in the face of betrayal. My phone lit up with responses from Nigel's family. Aaliyah's message was typically condescending. "How lovely of you to finally share with the family. We accept, of course." Bruce's response was immediate. "Great. Trisha and I could use a weekend away." I closed my eyes, imagining their faces when they realized what I'd done. The property would be sold by Thursday, leaving just enough time for the new owners to take possession before the family's planned arrival. Sandra's words from the bar echoed in my head. "This isn't you." Maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't who I used to be. But then again, I used to be the woman who trusted her husband, who believed in family loyalty, who thought love meant something. My phone buzzed again. A message from Rachel. "First showing tomorrow. Multiple buyers interested." I smiled into the darkness. Grandmother always said that sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales. She just never mentioned that sometimes you have to help it along. Inside, I heard Nigel on the phone, probably talking to his mother. His voice was muffled, but I caught fragments. "Different lately. Worried. Don't know what to do. Good. Let him worry. Let them all worry. I pulled my grandmother's shawl tighter around my shoulders and started making lists in my head. People to call, arrangements to make, pieces to move into place. The game was on, and this time I was writing the rules. The restaurant buzzed with dinner conversation as I sat across from Aliyah, watching her dissect her overpriced salmon with surgical precision. She'd insisted on this mother-daughter dinner before the weekend getaway, probably to scope out my intentions. I must say, she dabbed her lips with her napkin, this invitation came as quite a surprise. You've always been so private about your affairs, I smiled, cutting into my steak. Well, as you always say, family should share everything. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Indeed, though I hope you understand our concern about Nigel lately. He seems troubled. Does he? I took a sip of wine. I hadn't noticed. Come now, Lucille. She reached across the table, her manicured hand stopping short of touching mine. We both know things haven't been quite right since that unfortunate business with the money. Unfortunate business? The wine turned bitter in my mouth. Is that what we're calling theft now? Aliyah's smile tightened. We preferred to think of it as family helping family. Surely you understand. What I understand, I cut in, is that my grandmother worked 60 years as a teacher to leave me that inheritance. But please, tell me more about how your Maldives vacation was family helping family. A couple at the next table glanced our way. Aliyah lowered her voice, leaning forward. Now, dear, let's not make a scene. We're all trying to move forward, aren't we? That's why you've invited us to this lovely holiday home? Exactly. I forced a smile. It's time everyone got what they deserve. My phone vibrated. A text from Rachel. Paperwork finalized. Keys transfer Thursday. Everything all right? Aliyah asked, noticing my expression. Perfect. I tucked the phone away. Just confirming the weekend arrangements. Later that evening, I found Nigel waiting up in the living room. How was dinner with Mom? Illuminating. I dropped my keys in the bowl. Your brother called, by the way. He's bringing Roberto. My nephew, Nigel frowned, but he hates family gatherings. Apparently, Tricia insisted, something about family bonding. Nigel stood, approaching me cautiously. Luce, are you sure about this weekend? We could still cancel. And disappoint your mother, I stepped around him. She's so looking forward to seeing our holiday home, unless there's some reason you don't want them to come. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tell I'd noticed years ago. No, it's just, you've been different lately. Distant. Have I? I met his eyes. Or am I just finally seeing things clearly? The next morning, Sandra ambushed me at my office during lunch. This has gone far enough, she announced, dropping into the chair across from my desk. I talked to Rachel. I set down my sandwich. You what? She told me the house sold yesterday above asking price. Sandra leaned forward. Lucille, what happens when they show up and find strangers living there? Justice happens. I started gathering papers, avoiding her gaze. Karma happens. No, humiliation happens. To everyone involved, including you. She grabbed my wrist, forcing me to look at her. Is that really what your grandmother would want? My grandmother would want me to stand up for myself. Stand up, yes, but this? She shook her head. This is something else entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from Tricia. Roberto's so excited about the weekend. Thank you for bringing the family together like this. Sandra saw the message. Even the kid? Really? He's 16, not 6. But something twisted in my stomach. Besides, he should learn early that actions have consequences. Like his aunt's actions? Sandra stood, gathering her purse. Just think about what you're really trying to accomplish here, and whether it's worth the cost. After she left, I stared at the family photo on my desk, taken last Christmas, before I knew the truth. Aliyah, in her expensive new jewellery, Bruce showing off his watch, Tricia fussing over Roberto, Nigel's arm around my waist. All of it paid for with my grandmother's money. My phone rang, Rachel again. The new owners want to move in Friday morning. Will that be a problem? I thought about Aaliyah's smug smile at dinner, about Nigel's nervous hands, about Roberto's excitement. No, I said firmly. No problem at all. That evening, I packed my overnight bag for the weekend, laying out the documents I'd need. Property sale papers, bank statements, proof of every transaction they'd tried to hide. Nigel appeared in the doorway. Need help packing? No. I zipped the bag closed. Everything's exactly where it needs to be. Tomorrow they'd all learn what it feels like to have something taken away. Tomorrow the scales would finally balance. I just hoped Sandra was wrong about the cost. The caravan of cars pulled into the holiday home's driveway just as the sun began to set. I watched through the kitchen window as Aaliyah emerged from her Mercedes, designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the fading light. "This location is divine," she called out, while Bruce helped Trisha unload their SUV. Though I would have chosen something a bit more substantial. Roberto slouched out of the back seat, headphones firmly in place, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. At least someone was being honest about their feelings. "Mum, please," Nigel said, carrying their bags inside. "It's perfect for what we need." What they needed. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Lucille, darling," Trisha bustled in, pulling me into an unwanted hug. "This is so generous of you, bringing the family together like this." I extracted myself from her embrace. "Well, you know what they say about family and sharing." "Speaking of sharing," Bruce appeared, already heading for the wine fridge, "I hope you stocked up for the weekend." "Help yourself," I said, watching him select an expensive bottle. "It's what family does, right?" Aaliyah shot me a sharp look but said nothing. The evening progressed exactly as I'd expected. Bruce dominated the conversation with tales of his latest business ventures, while Trisha fussed over everyone's plates. Roberto remained glued to his phone, occasionally rolling his eyes at his parents' attempts to engage him. "Put that away," Bruce snapped at his son. "We're here for family time." "Whatever," Roberto muttered, but tucked the phone away. His eyes met mine across the table, and I saw a flash of understanding there that made me uncomfortable. After dinner, I escaped to the back deck, needing air. The sound of waves in the distance usually calmed me, but tonight they seemed to echo my turbulent thoughts. "Mom's driving me crazy," Nigel's voice came from behind me. "I'm sorry about all this." "Are you?" I turned to face him. "Sorry about what exactly?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I heard you and Mom at dinner the other night. At the restaurant. Eavesdropping now?" "The waiter told me you seemed upset." He ran his hands through his hair again. "Luce, I know I messed up, but they're still family." "Family?" I laughed quietly. "Is that what you told yourself when you were transferring my money to their accounts? That family makes it okay?" Inside, I could hear Aaliyah directing Bruce on where to put their bags. Still controlling everything, still acting like she owned the place. "Please," Nigel's voice cracked. "I'll do anything to make this right. I've been looking for better jobs, trying to figure out how to pay you back." "Mom," Roberto appeared in the doorway, interrupting Nigel's plea. "Dad's being a jerk again. Can I hang out here?" I nodded, grateful for the interruption. Roberto settled into one of the deck chairs, pulling out a sketchbook. "You draw?" I asked, noticing the detailed landscapes on the pages. "Yeah. Dad thinks it's a waste of time," he shrugged. "Says I should focus on business classes instead." "Like the business classes he took before losing all that money?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Roberto's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Nigel stepped forward quickly. "Nothing. He means nothing by it." "No. What did you mean?" Roberto pressed, looking at me. "Is that why you guys suddenly had money for that stupid car Dad bought?" "Roberto," Nigel started, but was cut off by Bruce's booming voice from inside. "Son, get in here and help your mother unpack." Roberto slammed his sketchbook shut. "I'm not deaf," he shouted back, but stood to go inside. At the door, he paused. "Thanks for letting me hide out here." After he left, Nigel turned to me. "Please don't drag him into this." "Into what?" I asked innocently. "The family business of taking what isn't yours." Through the window, I could see Aaliyah arranging her things in the master bedroom, my bedroom. As if she owned the place. Tomorrow she'd learn just how temporary her claim to this space was. I hear them, you know, I said quietly, when they think I'm not listening. Your mother planning more trips, Bruce talking about expanding his business, all while my grandmother's money sits in their accounts. I'll talk to them again, Nigel promised. Make them understand. Understand what? That actions have consequences. I checked my phone, a message from Rachel confirming tomorrow's timeline. Don't worry, Nigel, they'll understand soon enough. Inside, I could hear Aaliyah calling everyone to the living room for coffee and dessert, playing the perfect hostess in a house that wouldn't be here tomorrow. Coming? Nigel asked, holding the door. I smiled, thinking of the documents in my overnight bag upstairs. Of course. We wouldn't want to miss family time. The night was young and tomorrow promised to be unforgettable. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m. I'd been watching the clock, counting down the minutes, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. Who could that be? Aaliyah asked from her perch on the sofa where she'd been planning yet another family vacation on her iPad. I'll get it, I said, standing before Nigel could move. Rachel stood on the doorstep with the new owners, exactly as planned. Good morning, Lucille. We're here for the final walkthrough and key handover. The silence behind me was deafening. I'm sorry, Aaliyah's voice cut through the tension. Key handover? Yes. I turned to face the family, all frozen in various states of confusion. I sold the house. The new owners take possession today. Bruce was the first to recover. This is a joke, right? Like the joke of stealing my inheritance? I pulled the stack of bank statements from my bag. Or maybe like the joke of using my grandmother's money to fund your failed business ventures. Lucille. Nigel stepped forward, his face pale. What have you done? What have I done? I laughed, the sound sharp and cold. I've simply followed the family tradition of taking what isn't mine. Oh, wait, no, this house was actually mine to sell. Tricia clutched her coffee cup, looking between me and Nigel. I don't understand. We just got here. And now you're leaving. I turned to Rachel and the new owners. Please come in. Don't mind my soon-to-be ex-family. They were just packing. Ex-family? Aaliyah stood, her face flushed with anger. How dare you? After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done? I threw the bank statements onto the coffee table. You mean like spending my grandmother's life savings on your luxury vacations? Or helping Bruce buy his Mercedes? Please tell me more about everything you've done for me. Roberto picked up one of the statements, his eyes widening as he read. Dad, is this true? Is this where the money for your new car came from? Bruce snatched the paper from his hands. Stay out of this, Roberto. Why? I asked. Afraid he'll learn the family business too early? Stealing, lying, betraying trust? That's enough, Nigel shouted, making everyone jump. This is cruel, Lucille. Even for what we did, this is cruel. Cruel? I turned to him slowly. Was it cruel when you watched your mother spend my inheritance on first-class flights? Was it cruel when you helped Bruce hide his transfers? Or did cruelty only start mattering when you got caught? The new owners shifted uncomfortably by the door. Rachel cleared her throat. Perhaps we should come back. No need, I said firmly. The house needs to be vacated today. Those were the terms of sale. You can't do this, Aaliyah hissed, her perfect composure finally cracking. We'll fight this. With what? The money you stole from me? I smiled. Go ahead. I have all the documentation right here. Should we call the police? Discuss fraud charges? Tricia started crying, while Bruce cursed under his breath and began gathering their things. Roberto stood apart from them all, still holding one of the bank statements, his face a mask of disgust. I knew something was wrong, he said quietly. All those sudden gifts, the trips. I knew we couldn't afford it. Roberto, go pack your things, Bruce ordered. No. Roberto looked at his father. You're no better than the guys who scammed Grandpa out of his retirement. You're worse, because you did it to family. Aaliyah gasped. How dare you speak to your father that way? How dare you steal from Lucille? Roberto shot back. I watched as they all began to unravel. Trisha crying harder, Bruce and Roberto arguing, Aaliyah trying to maintain control of a situation long past controlling. Only Nigel remained silent, staring at the floor. "The movers will be here in an hour," I announced. "I suggest you all be gone by then." "Lucille," Nigel finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Please, we can work this out." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. The man I'd loved, who I'd trusted with everything, who had betrayed me so completely. "No," I said softly. "We really can't." As they gathered their belongings, amid tears and accusations and slammed doors, Roberto paused beside me. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what they did, for what we took from you." I touched his shoulder gently. "You didn't take anything, Roberto. Don't carry their guilt." He nodded, then followed his parents out the door. Rachel and the new owners began their walkthrough as the cars pulled away. I stood on the front porch, watching them disappear down the drive, feeling strangely empty. My phone buzzed. A message from Sandra. "Is it done?" I looked at the house that was no longer mine, at the family that was driving away, at the life I'd just blown apart. "Yes," I typed back. "It's done." But as I watched Nigel's car disappear around the bend, I wondered if anything was really finished at all. The cafe was nearly empty when Nigel found me 3 days later. I'd been expecting him. The dozens of missed calls and messages had made that inevitable. "You look terrible," I said as he slid into the booth across from me. The dark circles under his eyes matched the wrinkled state of his usually pristine shirt. "Mom's in the hospital," he said without preamble. "Anxiety attack. The doctors say stress triggered it." I stirred my coffee slowly. "Is that supposed to make me feel guilty?" "No." He rubbed his face. "I don't know. Everything's falling apart, Luce. Bruce's wife left him, took Roberto with her. Mum's a mess. And I..." He trailed off. "And you what?" I set my spoon down. "Finally have to face consequences." The waitress approached, but one look at our faces sent her retreating. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said. "Mum was in trouble with her mortgage, and she was crying, and I thought I could fix it. Take a little money, pay it back before you noticed. But you didn't stop at a little, did you?" He shook his head. "Once they knew about the money, it was like a switch flipped. Every problem became an emergency. Every want became a need. And I was trapped. You could have told me." "Could I?" He leaned forward. "You're the successful one, the smart one. I was already the failure who couldn't match your salary. How could I admit I'd betrayed you too?" A laugh escaped me, bitter and sharp. "So you betrayed me more to avoid admitting you'd betrayed me?" "That's some logic, Nigel." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know it makes no sense, but I've lost everything now. You, the respect of my nephew, my family's trust. Even Mom won't look me in the eye anymore." Outside, rain began to fall, matching the mood. A text lit up my phone, Sandra asking if I was okay. I ignored it. "Roberto called me yesterday," I said, watching Nigel's reaction. "Did you know he's applying to art school?" Surprise flickered across his face. "What? But Bruce would never..." "Bruce doesn't get a say anymore. Trisha's supporting Roberto's choice." I took a sip of coffee. "Funny how truth can set people free." Is that what this was about? Setting people free? No. I met his eyes. This was about justice, about consequences, about showing your family they can't just take what they want without paying a price. He was quiet for a long moment. "And what about us? What's the price for what we had?" "Had," I emphasized. Past tense. "Lucille, please." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I'll do anything to make this right. I've been looking at jobs in other cities, places where we could start fresh." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. Do you really think I could ever trust you again? Sleep next to you, share a life with you, knowing what you did?" The rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows. A few tables away, an elderly couple shared a piece of pie, feeding each other bites and laughing softly. "I love you," he whispered. "Doesn't that count for anything?" Love without trust is just another way to get hurt. I stood, gathering my purse. Your mother will be fine. She's tougher than she lets on. Bruce will either learn from this or he won't. That's his choice. And you. I paused, looking at the man I'd once planned to grow old with. You need to figure out who you are without your family's expectations crushing you. And what about you? His voice was barely audible above the rain. Who are you without me? I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's strength, of Roberto's courage to choose his own path, of Sandra's unwavering friendship. I'm someone who finally understands that sometimes love isn't enough. That trust, once broken, leaves scars that no amount of apologies can heal. So that's it? He looked up at me, eyes glistening. 8 years together, just gone? No. I pulled out my wallet, leaving money for my coffee. 8 years gone the moment you chose your family's greed over our future. Today is just me finally accepting that truth. As I walked toward the door, he called out one last time. What do I tell them? The family? I turned back, rain framing the window behind me. Tell them thank you for teaching me that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who claim to love you best. Outside, the rain soaked through my jacket, but I didn't rush to my car. Instead, I stood there, letting the water wash over me, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed again. Sandra. Wine and pizza at my place tonight? This time I replied, yes, I think it's time to start new traditions. Behind me, through the cafe window, I could see Nigel with his head in his hands. But for the first time since this all began, I felt no urge to look back. Sandra's doorbell rang just as we were opening our second bottle of wine. Through the peephole, I saw Aaliyah standing there, perfectly coiffed, despite her recent hospital stay. Don't answer it, I whispered, but Sandra was already opening the door. We need to talk, Aaliyah announced, stepping inside uninvited. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating without her usual entourage. Sandra glanced at me. I'll give you two some privacy. No, I said firmly. Whatever she has to say, she can say it in front of you. Aaliyah perched on the edge of an armchair, her designer purse clutched tight in her lap. The doctors say I should avoid stress, but I couldn't leave things like this. Like what? I took a deliberate sip of wine. Like the mess you made stealing my inheritance? Like family torn apart, she snapped, then caught herself smoothing her skirt. Nigel's devastated. Bruce's marriage is over. Even Roberto won't speak to us. Sounds like karma to me. Is that what you wanted? Her voice cracked. To destroy everything. Sandra shifted uncomfortably on the couch beside me, but I held my ground. No, Aaliyah. That's what you wanted when you took my money. I just made sure everyone saw the truth. The truth? She laughed bitterly. The truth is we were desperate. Bruce's business was failing. The bank was threatening foreclosure on my house. So you stole from me. I set my glass down hard. Instead of asking for help, instead of being honest, you all conspired to take what wasn't yours. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family. I was standing now, years of hurt pouring out. Family doesn't manipulate and lie and treat someone's inheritance like their personal piggy bank. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Roberto. I tracked Mum's phone, he said, stepping inside. Figured she'd come here. Aaliyah turned to him. Roberto, darling? Don't. He held up his hand. I'm not here for you. I came to thank Lucille. That stopped everyone short. Sandra quietly slipped into the kitchen, leaving us to our family drama. Thank me, I asked. For what? For showing me what real strength looks like. He pulled out a folded paper from his jacket. I got accepted to art school, full scholarship. Aaliyah gasped. But your father's business is built on lies, Roberto cut in. Just like everything else in this family, I'm done pretending. I watched Aaliyah's face crumple, years of careful control finally breaking. We were trying to protect our way of life. By stealing someone else's? Roberto shook his head. That's not protection, Grandma, that's theft. My phone buzzed. A text from Nigel. Mum's gone. Are you with her? He's worried about you, I told Aaliyah, showing her the message. He's always worried about me. She dabbed at her eyes with an expensive handkerchief. That's how we got here, isn't it? His need to fix everything, my need to maintain appearances. And my inheritance paid the price, I finished. Roberto sat on the arm of my chair. Mum's filing for divorce says she's tired of Dad's schemes. Good for her, I said, meaning it. Aaliyah stood suddenly. I should go. The doctors said. Sit down, I interrupted. We're not done. She sank back into the chair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. You want to fix this? I asked. Really fix it? She nodded slowly. Then start with the truth. All of it. No more manipulation. No more pretense. The truth! She glanced at Roberto, then back to me. The truth is, I was jealous. Of your success, your independence, everything came so easily to you. Easy? I laughed. I worked 2 jobs through college. My grandmother saved for 30 years to leave me that inheritance. Nothing about it was easy. I know that now. She twisted the handkerchief in her hands. I know we can never repay what we took, not just the money, but the trust. No, I agreed. You can't. Roberto stood. But we can do better going forward. Be better. Sandra reappeared with fresh glasses of wine and a knowing look. Family's complicated, she said, handing them out. But secrets make it toxic. Aaliyah took a small sip. What do we do now? Now? I looked at Roberto's acceptance letter, at Aaliyah's trembling hands, at the mess we'd all made. Now we start over. With truth this time. My phone buzzed again. Nigel sending another worried message about his mother. Tell him I'm safe, Aaliyah said quietly. Tell him. Tell him I'm finally learning what family really means. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across Sandra's living room. Nothing was fixed, not really. But as I watched Roberto show his grandmother his portfolio, saw her genuine interest in his art for the first time, I realized that sometimes breaking things is the only way to rebuild them stronger. To new beginnings, Sandra raised her glass. To truth, Roberto added. To family, Aaliyah whispered. I lifted my glass thinking of my grandmother's wisdom. To consequences. The autumn breeze rustled through my grandmother's garden as I knelt to plant the last of her favourite roses. Sandra worked beside me, carefully arranging mulch around the new bushes. She would have loved this, Sandra said, sitting back on her heels, using the house sale money to restore her garden. It felt right. I brushed dirt from my hands. Better than letting it sit in a bank account like the inheritance did. The sound of a car pulling up made us both turn. Roberto stepped out carrying his portfolio and wearing a paint-splattered t-shirt. Sorry I'm late, he called out. Class ran over. You're just in time for lunch, I replied, leading them both inside. The kitchen still smelled like my grandmother's recipes, though now my attempts at her famous lasagna filled the oven. Mom wanted me to give you this, Roberto said, pulling an envelope from his bag as we settled around the kitchen table. Inside was a check, not for the full amount they'd taken, but significant nonetheless. She's been selling her jewellery, he explained. Says she doesn't need the reminders of who she used to be. Sandra examined the check. That's got to be at least 20 pieces from her collection. 23? A voice said from the doorway. We all turned to see Aaliyah standing there, looking different in simple slacks and a sweater. May I come in? I nodded, watching as she took in the kitchen's transformation. The fresh paint, the new herbs growing in the window, the life returning to my grandmother's space. Bruce called, she said, accepting the coffee Sandra offered. He's agreed to sell the Mercedes. Says he wants to contribute to making things right. And Nigel? I asked quietly. Starting his new job next week, teaching high school economics. She smiled slightly. Says he wants to help young people understand money better than he did. Roberto opened his portfolio, spreading his latest works across the table. Vibrant paintings captured moments of our family drama. Aaliyah in the hospital, Bruce standing alone in an empty house, me in the garden bringing life back to dead earth. These are for my final project, he explained. The professor says art should tell truth, even when it hurts. Speaking of truth, Aaliyah reached into her purse. I found these while sorting through my things. She laid out old photographs. My grandmother at my college graduation, at family dinners, always watching, always wise. She knew, I said, touching one photo gently, about the kind of people you all were. She told me to be careful, but I thought love would be enough. Love without respect is just control, Sandra murmured, quoting my grandmother's favourite saying. The timer dinged, and I pulled the lasagna from the oven. It wasn't perfect. The edges were a bit too brown, the cheese not quite melted right, but it was honest work, my own attempt at carrying forward a legacy. I've been thinking, Aaliyah said as I served the plates, about what your grandmother taught you about money, about worth. I spent so long trying to appear valuable that I forgot how to actually be valuable. That's why you took the inheritance, Roberto asked. She nodded slowly. It was never really about the money. It was about what it represented. Success, security, respect. All the things I thought I could buy. But you can't, I said. Those things have to be earned. Like trust? She met my eyes. Like trust, I agreed. Sandra raised her glass. To earning things honestly. To Grandma's garden, Roberto added. To new growth, Aaliyah whispered. I looked around the table, at Sandra's unwavering friendship, at Roberto's brave new path, at Aaliyah's humble attempts at redemption. The inheritance was gone, but something else had grown in its place. Understanding, perhaps. Or wisdom. My phone lit up with a text from Nigel. The divorce papers are final. Thank you for teaching me about consequences. I showed the message to Sandra, who squeezed my hand. You okay? Yeah, I said, realizing I meant it. Some things have to break before they can heal properly. Roberto looked up from his plate. Like bones. Like trust, Aaliyah answered softly. Like family. Outside, the roses caught the afternoon light, their new blooms promising future gardens, future growth. My grandmother had always said that money was like water. It could nourish growth or drown you depending on how you used it. I have something else for you, Aaliyah said, pulling out another envelope. Your grandmother's recipes. I found them in Nigel's things. They belong here with you. I opened the envelope, recognizing the familiar handwriting. At the bottom of each recipe, my grandmother had written little notes, wisdom disguised as cooking tips. Remember, I read aloud from the lasagna recipe, the secret ingredient isn't in the sauce. It's in the love you put into making it right. Sandra laughed. She always did have a way of making everything a life lesson. She still does, I said, looking around at my imperfect healing family. She still does.